Hi boys and girls, Tony Topping, Covert Witness, episode 6, I think. You lose track. In fact, in this environment you can become quite disorientated with everything. Thought I'd do yet another blog for you. This time it's all about contact with UFOs, what goes on, and the journey that is not easy with them, with the contact with them, the process involved with them, and seeing the landscape of the paranormal world that is created by them, which is more than just paranormal. It's to do with signatures in time, it's to do with signals in time, it's to do with ethics, it's to do with a lot of factors. And there are a lot of people in the UK who are keeping quiet about their experiences. I'm one of the people who put my experiences in the public domain because I believe it's in the public interest to do so. Some people believe in the military perhaps and in the intelligence community that it is not in the public interest to let the public know about what goes on. After what happened to me and the covert harassment I suffered, it is in the public interest to let the public know what is happening. And as I've always said, these covert witness blogs are not for you if you're not into UFOs, move along. They're not for you if you're a hardened cynic about the subject, if you don't believe it and you think I'm a lunatic, jog on, move on. They're not for you. For those of you who wish to stay with me on the subject, this is just for you. And it explains a bit more this week about events that happened to me. This journey with UFOs is not for the faint-hearted, but I try and paint an actual, genuine, real-time intelligence picture, really, from my armchair, as to what is going on around me. And no, it's not made up either. This is real life. This is what happens. And I think, to use a metaphor, I got hooked on Person of Interest. I got hooked on the lady called Shaw, played by Sarah Sahai. I think it's pronounced Sahai. And, her personality, looking at the way she portrays herself as somebody who's handling a lot of shit and coping very well. And I thought maybe I need to be more like her, more Shaw than Tone. But I don't know. I really don't know. You have to be very hardened to all this. You really do. You go through a lot. Physically, I'm in fine fettle, mentally a bit exhausted with it all. And Person of Interest is just very interesting because of the metaphor that it actually uses, the kind of like subliminal metaphor that the programme displays. I'll get to the UFO bit in a minute. I'm just building up a picture for you. Stay with it. So, Person of Interest, it basically means, as I said on Twitter, that the governments, despite their denial, are interested in UFOs. They are equally interested in people who are having contact with UFOs, despite a very public denial that they are of no defence significance. These aircraft will routinely come into UK airspace, for example, and routinely exit UK airspace. And the tall, blonde, Scandinavian-type people behind a lot of them behind the triangle UFO craft will come in very stealthily and go out again. I don't think they're here to threaten or be military combative in any way. I don't think they pose a military threat. I think they're more warning. There's this continual thing of a warning that goes on behind the scenes about where governments are going and where we're going as a civilization. And this is very interesting with them because it leads to all kinds of ethical questions that I'm not really impressed with them. I'm not really impressed with a certain grouping that I've had to deal with for a very long time now. And it's interesting because what this is all about is, if you look at the Russian psychic spies, the Russian espionage unit that was led by a guy called Alexei Savin, who I often refer to, a very private man. You will hear of his escapades with his remote viewing unit, his psychic spy unit, who were contacted, and he said this in the Russian media, they had contacted some people, some extraterrestrial civilization, by the power of thought and mind. They'd contacted them and the quality of information was quite astounding. He said this quite openly in public, quite a well-respected guy. And there's also another man as well called Boris Ratkinov, who is a remote influencer. And what the American psychic spies called remote influencing, or 8 ability, the ability to influence somebody's mind, the Russians called it walk-in mind operations. Walk-in mind operations. And this is what goes on with me. This is part of the shit I have to put up with, is something called walk-in mind operations. And what happens is that you have a situation occurring similar to the movie Inception, whereby you have this environment where you go many layers deep beyond the subconsciousness, and beyond that there's kind of like a continuum, or an environment that is not bound by the rules of time as we know it. And it's similar to the movie Inception, where you've got people coming in and coming out. Now, some of these people are not human, and you will be staggered to know, and some of you do know by the way, that there is no doubt whatsoever that they are not human, but they're in your environment. And as I've said, this causes paradox. It causes an extraordinary paradox. What I term the Yazmat effect, or what they term the Yazmat effect. Yazmat meaning because of the causal reason why. And it basically means that even a clip like this could be creating a paradox, in that it's kind of like creating the situation that hasn't happened with people that are not in the timeline yet, but will be. And then they'll see this, and it causes a paradox in time. And it's very tricky to explain, but it's kind of like, it's interesting. The concept of this is interesting. So way down the line, people will be looking at these clips and kind of like going, oh my God, what happened to him, kind of thing. But yet, that's way down the timeline. But yet some of the stuff I have to deal with these ETs in the UFOs is from that timeline. So it's from a future point in time that does not know locality. Their intelligence, the way they, their flight technology, everything about them is related to time travel and is related to artificial intelligence. I've said enough already. So last night, in case in particular of, well, actually not last night, just go back a bit. A few weeks ago, I suddenly learnt what one of these groups was up to with me, and and I thought it absolutely stank unethically. And as one of these people within this continuing environment that I talk of has said, they have absolved all moral and ethical responsibility for their actions, and that's what they do. They seem to absolve all moral and ethical considerations about the impact on people's lives. If you look on the internet at the moment, you will find there are people who are contactees having experiences with UFOs, and there's a theme emerging that not all of it is peace and light, which is why you have to be very cautious and very careful, A, with what you say, but B, with how you interpret the information that's presented in front of you. You've got to be very streetwise about it, because you don't really know who they are. In the ancient times before Atlantis, before all the land was ice, there was the Toltecs of Atlantis, not to be confused with the ancient Toltec of Mexico. And there's a very interesting, there's a guy called a Nahal, or what was known as a seer, in the Toltec tradition of pre-Atlantean. And the work of a guy called Tyon Maris, who's sadly no longer with us, was very interesting in his book Return of the Warriors, it was called. Just balance my camera, sorry boys and girls. Yeah, Return of the Warriors. And within that, he was indicating that UFOs and the situation regarding them, we are not to... What's the word I'm looking for? With these UFOs and the people behind them, it's easier to think that they're here as some kind of spiritual ambassadorship, that they're here to lift the planet, they're here to evolve us, they're here to help us in some way. That's not always the case with them. They're here for their own agendas in some cases. As Colonel Philip Corso said, just before I go back to the Nahal bit, as Colonel Philip Corso said, that he was aware that his US military was aware that people were being abducted, implanted, and there's no ethics about all this. There's just the ethics of it stink. And what happened to me? The actions of one female individual from a UFO has proven to me that it absolutely ethically stinks. What's happened? What she's done? I'm not happy with it at all. and they seem to think that I am meant to be happy with this, and this is really going on, this liaison, and I'm not happy with it at all. It's personal to me what she's done, but I'm just not happy with it. And they walk in and they just walk in and walk out again, and you are left to pick up the pieces. And you're monitored. You become a person of interest. You most certainly do, despite the very public denial. And of course, what this Nahal said, Tyon Maris, Nahal stands for like master of the Toltec tradition, was indicating that the Toltec knew of the fact that we were having visitation. I did the Zulu, I did quite a lot of nations in Africa, natives in Africa, who actually knew we were having visitation coming. And the thing was that you could not, as Tyon says, you couldn't actually say that their ethics or their perception of you as a human being or their human rights would be valued by them. You couldn't actually say that, and you can't. You can't actually say that. A couple of times intervention has occurred within this environment that I talk of. It's beyond the dreamscape. It's similar to something, if you imagine the film Inception, many layers deep below the subconscious, where people are interacting with each other. It's similar to, which is like dream warfare. What you've got, if you imagine that environment and people that are non-human coming into it and coming out again of all different shapes and varieties, and they are simply, they look like us but they're not. And this is the problem that we have with it as human beings. We have to handle it very safely. And not only that, not only is that troubling, but our own human beings, our own military, our own intelligence gathering apparatus, our own armed forces, or should I say shadow governments, are also engaged in this behaviour as well. I know I had 5 years of it. 5 years of neural monitoring by a certain individual running his little circus and his cronies. So, in a way, this is a very unorthodox way of getting one's own back by coming out with this information. And the other night, last night, was no exception when I got whacked. Occasionally you can get whacked by these unidentified flying objects, and last night was no exception. That's why I say you've always got to be very cautious and very streetwise. I know a few years ago, I went to a location where I was filming with my camera, and I had a standoff with one of these little dots of light things. It wasn't an aircraft, it was a little dot of light in a field. And it looked at me, and I was looking at it. And then, as I say, it actually did something to me. Part of my leg, actually. It heated it up and then flew off at speed. And that location is still relevant today because I'm expecting to film something, and whatever it is that's doing this knows this, and it's also waiting to observe what I'm going to film. I'm afraid that's the way the cookie crumbles with Covert Witness. So what we've got, Covert Witness here, we've got this scenario of these these little dot of light things, 10 a penny they are, just coming in, coming out. I suspect them to be pilotless. I suspect them to be drones. And there was an interesting incident before I fell asleep the other evening. I was just nodding off, and I go into a kind of like a different state of mind. I've had it years. It's one of those things I have to live with. One of those days we'll try and unravel it. I don't know whether rational human psychology will be able to assist, give anything a whirl. It will be interesting to find out. But what happened was, as I just nodded off, there was something that wandered into my awareness that was about 7 feet in height and frankly looked frightening. But it didn't dare come anywhere closer to me. But it was shocking to see it. It wasn't friendly, and it was by no means kind of like looking out for my interest. And I have sometimes wondered whether there is a connection between these little dot of light UFOs and what I saw, whether the two are connected. There's some type of connection going on between these little dots of light that come in and the visiting extraterrestrials. Some type of connection between the two, and they're actually bigger than what they are. And I was coming out of I had a dream only last week about some stuff going on, and then one of them came in at low over the roof, very bright like a car headlight. But last night was quite an exceptional thing, because I was stood outside just watching, and then we just got this little dot of light just fly over very high, and I thought, hello, hello, that looks interesting. And sure enough, I'm sat here a bit later on during the evening, and I just, how can I describe it to you, dear listener? It's like an advanced form of mind control where your thoughts are not your own. Somebody somewhere is speaking to you, and your thoughts are not your own, and it's not pleasant. And it was them. It was whatever it was that, and it wasn't pleasant. And the reason why it wasn't pleasant was because you have a situation occurring for the human race where our consciousness at some level is controlled, and there's some kind of controlling element out there among them, and then there's some kind of opposing element to that control. It's as if humanity, it's as if it's battlefield Earth. For some reason, we as a race are in the centre of something very big. It's a big universe, but we appear to be. I know on YouTube, just as a sideline, people are filming lots of these mini objects that are coming in, that are hovering around, strange-looking things and flying off. Well, that's because the planet's being probed. People are sending from out there. We are not alone in the universe, and I think civilizations are sending probes in just to have a reconnaissance and go back again. From other galaxies, Andromeda, wherever, I do believe that. Covert Witness believes that is the case. And I also strongly believe that after that I got whacked last night, ladies and gentlemen, and it's like having, when you're thinking of something like reading the paper, just imagine somebody else reading the paper. And what they said was most unpleasant. And it was to do with the fact that I'm having a liaison with something else out there that's leading, maybe, I sincerely hope, to something a bit positive. And that's not liked. You can't do that. That's not liked. The other issue, which most governments are aware of, and it's no secret really, but it is, it's not in public view, is Antarctica and the UFO situation there, which is known by the American governments and UK governments. In fact, the UK government was the first to have operations in that area against some mysterious forces that were known as the Polar Iceman, called Operation Taberland. Members of the Special Boat Squadron, a guy who was in the Special Boat Squadron testifies, I don't know whether he's still alive, but he testified after 1 year, he testified, 10 years later he was re-interviewed, and he didn't change his story. It was in Nexus magazine, to do with dealing with the polar men, where they'd been given an expedition to go to Antarctica because a Royal Marines unit had been murdered out there, and they wanted to find out more, and what they came across was absolutely staggering. And it is said that a component element of the UFO phenomena, and it's only part of the jigsaw, is in that area, in the Antarctic region. The Russians do believe that that area is part of a wormhole where UFOs enter and enter out again. I strongly believe, from what the Scandinavians looking UFO occupants are telling me, after the few incidents that I had with them, they have some interesting, very simple concepts for navigation across the universe, which I'm going to put in a book. I'm not going to say anything about that at the moment. And the fact that they were commenting that the flight technology we're using is quite primitive, and it really quite primitive. Although looking at a Typhoon aircraft, one of the RAF's Typhoon aircrafts, we can see that the manoeuvrability is pretty impressive, but their craft can, for example, travel at Mach 12 and stop dead. And that must take a lot of knowledge and technical know-how. And there's that strange moment that I had with them where they came in, I was asleep, and I knew it was them coming in over the house. And it was as if, it was a very incredible moment, really. A moment of kind of like silence and peace, and the fact that they said, we're here. And they were very respectful. And I got the impression that they were very respectful of the fact that they were in another country's airspace as well. I just got that impression that they were just respectful, and that they were watching very carefully events that were going on around me. But last night, ladies and gentlemen, I got whacked by one of these UFOs again. It's very difficult to explain to you, but they don't call me Covert Witness for nothing. It really does go on. And I live in hope that things will improve. I live in hope that we will get there eventually with it all and create an even bigger picture. We're going to get the illustrator Lloyd Canning once again to do some pickies for me. so that my visions of what I see are brought to life. I'll give you one example. You know, we're talking people who look like me and you, but our facial features are radically different. But you're talking beings with high foreheads, for example, very long flowing ginger hair, Colbert blue eyes, and they clearly are like us. That's the thing, they're like me and you, and yet they're not. It just takes a bit of getting used to when you see them. And you may think, some of you, that I've made this up as I go along. Well, that's fair enough if you want to think that, but the fact of the matter is, I am Covert Witness. It really is happening. These events are going on. They're not going to stop, it would appear, and it was most unpleasant last night, just getting whacked by something that's controlling, that thinks it controls something. As a friend of mine said, it's a spiritual thing, and it is. It's a spiritual thing, and the reality of it is this: they're not in control of humanity's destiny, nor where we go spiritually or evolve to. They're not in control of that, and I think they know that. I do. So the liaison continues as a covert witness. I'm still hoping to film the UFO in question. It's still not turned up yet, but it will. I'm sure it will. I've had company, as I say, from the skies above over this past week. But it's not the kind of company that I really want to keep, and it's not the kind of company I want to film. No point in me filming a dot of light. There's just no point in me filming one of these white dots of light unless it comes in close, and that could be worrying if they come in close, because you don't quite know what you're dealing with. But they're keeping their distance, even though they're huffing and puffing. They're keeping their distance. So, Covert Witness, just painting the picture, painting the landscape, as it were, and lots more to come, I think. We've got a journalist from one of the national newspapers looking at my story at the moment. We're going to crack on with the book. The world of television is currently quiet. I despair at mainstream broadcasters in the UK misrepresenting people like myself. I just wonder whether we'll ever get the chance to do a nice, sensible documentary about what happened to me. But, you know, it's not the be-all and end-all. I think I'll end up doing my own. I think I will end up doing my own film. I certainly do. So these are the updates from Covert Witness, and the moral of my story is: be safe, ladies and gentlemen. If you're having experiences, don't trust what you see. Don't trust what you see. Don't assume them to be your friend, and try as best you can to carry on with daily living. Because I've paid Covert Witness here has paid the ultimate price, really, in terms of everything. As one of them said to me, I'd lost everything and gained everything all at the same time. And it is a spectacular universe. We live in great hope for the human spirit, we certainly do. Okay, Covert Witness, over and out.